Hi everybody and welcome to Mindfulness Monday. Today's mindfulness technique we're going to be learning is called D.O.T.S, distraction, opting out, thinking and substance/self-harm. So the idea of today's technique is to understand our anxiety on a different level and what techniques we are currently using to try to control our anxiety. Today we are not going to be changing anything. We're not going to try to change anything. We are simply trying to understand ways that we are trying to control our anxiety. Control is actually the problem, not the solution. Anxiety is, our unwanted thoughts. It's that constant worry, that constant fear. And many of us use our anxiety against ourselves. We haven't accepted what is going on, which is being mindful. We can sit within our anxiety and go, I'm feeling very anxious. And if I sit and accept what is going on, it will pass. Anxiety always passes. But all too often, we spend so much of our time trying to control it. So today we're going to work through the 4 steps to see which techniques you regularly use to try to control your anxiety. So the first one is distraction. Do you try to distract yourself on a regular basis to avoid feeling your anxiety? So things like, do you just tune out on Netflix for hours and hours and hours to avoid confronting or understanding what is going on in your mind? Do you distract yourself through shopping, online shopping, going out to the shops? Do you distract yourself through work, constant work? That is one way a lot of people will try to control their anxiety, is through distraction. And if you are using this technique, does it work? What is the cost for you in distracting yourself? If it has worked, what's the benefits of using this? If it hasn't worked, what is the cost to you? So for example, if you are distracting yourself through, say, binge Netflix, and the cost to you is you are not getting things done, and what that is happening, or what is causing the ripple effect of that is your anxiety is building, because part of your anxiety is I'm not getting enough things done. And if you're using distraction as a way to control your anxiety, it may work in the short term whilst you're being distracted, but in the long term, is it actually working? The second way is through opting out. Now, opting out is when we quit, we avoid, we procrastinate. Are you using this type of strategy to control your anxiety? Do you quit? You go through the stages and get 3/4 through something and then quit. And in the short term, it may be reducing your anxiety. So that may be something you use and it has worked for you. Is it working for you in the long term? If it is and your anxiety isn't coming back, or it's not building, or your overwhelm's not getting to the point that you cannot cope, then maybe it's something that we need to look at, that opting out fixes things in the short term, but in the long term, that control is not actually working. One, we're not accepting what's going on. We're simply trying to opt out of our anxiety, which we all know is pretty impossible. The third one is thinking. Some of us try to think through our anxiety, which in essence is fantastic once we've accepted it. But all too often, we don't accept the anxiety, we just try to think through it. And ways that we do this is we blame. We blame other people for our anxiety. We blame the situation. Well, it's not my fault that I have anxiety. It's hereditary. It's my parents. So we're trying to think through the problem. We rehash the problem. We say things like, why me? We beat ourselves up for feeling anxious. So in this strategy, we're trying to think through the problem without actually accepting it. If this is the strategy you use, does it work? Has it worked? If it is working, then maybe it's a strategy that you continue to use. If it's not working, what is the cost to you? Now, a big cost of thinking is beating ourselves up. I am so stupid. I wish I didn't do this. I can't believe that I do this. I should know better. I'm smarter than this. I'm more mature than this. These are ways that we beat ourselves up. We're trying to think through to control our anxiety. But in essence, the control is actually causing more of the problem than being the solution. And the final one is substance and self-harm. Do you use things like food to control the anxiety? When we're having those anxiety emotions, those anxious feelings, do we try to suppress them by using food? Do we try to suppress our anxiety by drinking alcohol? Do we try to suppress and control our anxiety by taking medication? And let me just state, medication for anxiety, for some people, absolutely. For a lot of other people, they use medication as a way to suppress their anxiety, as opposed to accepting what is going on and then moving from acceptance. Things actually start having a ripple effect and change of their own accord. Self-harm, some people use self-harm as opposed to suppress their anxiety. I don't want to feel the anxious thoughts. I don't want to have them in my head, so I will use self-harm. So a good way to remember it is through DOTS. The best way to use this technique, this mindfulness technique, is to analyze all those 4 areas. So when you are feeling anxious, analyze what you are doing to try to control your anxiety. Mindfulness is about accepting without judgment. We can't change anything until we actually accept it. These are used often to suppress anxiety in the short term. In the long term, if it continues to come back, then maybe these techniques that you constantly use are not working. We often use the same type of pattern. We create a habit, and yet we expect different results. But I'm actually trying to work on my anxiety, but we're using the same pattern, but expect a different result. So try this mindfulness technique to see if you can work out what kind of strategies you're currently using to suppress your anxiety and whether it is working for you in the long term and what is the cost to you by using these strategies. Have a great Monday and we will see you next week.